Hello, and welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Boland, and I'm a congenital amputee of the right hand. In this show, I will interview other amputees and allow them to tell you their incredible life stories. I'll also feature family members of amputees and others who support the amputee community, all in an effort to discuss the challenges and triumphs of those living with limb loss. So stick around and listen to inspirational stories and find out why we say, we're not stumped. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Boland, and today I got Levin Sliker on. Levin is the co-founder of Point Designs, and they specialize in partial hand amputee and the prosthetics there. So Levin, thank you so much for being on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm very excited. We had a great conversation for like the last 25 minutes, and I got to learn quite a bit. But what I want to do, and we always start the We're Not Stumped podcast with in your own words, that segment. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about you.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. Let's see. I'll start. I think, where I am today stems from probably my childhood. So I'll go all the way back to my childhood. So I grew up in a household. Both of my parents were veterinarians, and they owned their own veterinary hospital. So I grew up in the veterinary clinic. I grew up surrounded by animals, and I grew up with parents who ran a fairly successful business for 30 years. So, when it came time for me to choose what I wanted to do, I knew veterinary medicine probably wasn't it. Maybe because I'd heard a little bit. I'd heard the dark side of that industry a little too much as a child. But I happened to be really good at math and science, and I really had a passion for the medical industry, and I knew I wanted to help people. So I went to engineering school, ended up getting a bachelor's, master's, and Ph.D. in mechanical engineering. And along the way, I had a really great mentor in undergrad and throughout graduate school. And I started working on devices for an endoscopic, robotic endoscopic devices. So that's kind of how I entered into the medical device field. Really enjoyed working on those projects. After graduate school, I kind of, I had to kind of choose what it was I wanted to do next. With a PhD, I kind of naturally gravitated toward academia. So I ended up with a faculty position at the University of Colorado at the Anschutz Medical Campus. And I got involved in several projects, all related to the assistive technology field. So I was working on anything from powered wheelchairs, wheelchair accessories, fall detection devices, and I eventually got involved in this prosthetic finger project with a fellow colleague, Dr. Richard Weir, and Dr. Jacob Segil and Stephen Huddle. So we worked on this project for a couple of years, and eventually got it to the point where we thought we could commercialize it. We thought we had something that could really make an impact. So that's when we decided to create the company Point Designs to commercialize that technology. So that was back in 2016. We launched our first device, the Point Digit, in January 2017. And today we've got 6 devices, 2 facilities, and we're distributing products to 30 different countries.
It's amazing. And we were talking earlier about how the partial hand or finger amputees are maybe some of the most underserved area of the amputees. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And really that right there was a big driving factor for why we're doing what we're doing. We made an intentional decision to focus on fingers and serving the partial hand amputee community. Because they really are the most underserved patient population, and there's a lot of people out there who are missing fingers, who have partial hand limb difference. So 100%, it's really one of those factors that motivated our decision to design prosthetic finger technology and not hands, for example.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. What was the first product you developed? The point pivot, I believe.
It was actually the point digit.
Digit, pardon me.
So yeah, no problem. Yeah, so the point digit is a full finger prosthesis. So that's intended for people who are um, missing entire fingers at the MCP joint. So that's the joint most proximal to the palm.
Yeah.
That was again an intentional decision because it was that was a need that we were filling. Um, Actually, one of our co-founders, Dr. Richard Weir, he's been in the field as a research scientist for his entire career. And at the start of his career, he actually went to prosthetics and orthotics school. And during that school, he met a lot of people and maintained relationships with those people. They all went and practiced as prosthetists, and he went and became a research scientist. But he maintained relationships with them throughout his career, and so it was a lot of those folks who practiced for decades, and they approached him and said, "Hey, we don't have a prosthetic finger, and there are a lot of people out here who could use this. Can you make one?" And they knew he had the capability and the experience, and so that's really what motivated that first device. So yeah, we started with the point digit, and it's all of our devices are they have kind of a similar principle of operation. They've got a ratcheting mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
so that the user can position the finger into a number of different kind of click stops,
Mm-hmm.
and they can release it. There's a button on the backside or a full flexion release
Yeah.
mechanism. So yeah, we started with the full finger, and then we kind of grew from there.
The nice thing that I read, all of them have a 150-pound load rating, so it's very durable and very strong. I'm sure that was part of the design you had in mind from the beginning.
Yeah, it definitely was. We, that was again one of those needs that we discovered as we were doing our, we were in a customer discovery, needs discovery phase. We did, became apparent that one of the most important things or features of a prosthetic finger was durability and reliability, and that really has become a central focus to all of the devices that we design. We really we're really committed to putting out devices that are durable and reliable. So we want people to be able to use these to we want people to be able to find them functional and to be able to use them to do as many activities as they desire to do. And I think we've been pretty successful at that. The one data point that I can share is that we track our return rate or our repair rate, and for the past 7 years, that repair rate's been less than 3%, which in our industry is pretty good.
Yeah, in particular, I think you said when it comes to upper limb, that's really unheard of to have it so low. Is it?
I think that's true. I mean, I don't know everybody else's statistic, but anecdotally, I think that is very, I think it's very low.
Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I think I told you earlier that I broke mine when I was a young man and haven't put it on since. So I can tell you from personal experience, yes, unfortunately, they do break, especially when you use them as a hammer. One of the you have the point thumb, like I said, the point partial, the point. When you go down your product offering, what inspires you to create the new offering, and what are you looking to maybe add or enhance as you move forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really what, well, the general answer to that question, then I can go into some specifics on how we prioritize these.
Oh.
But the general answer is, we're focused on, again, people with partial hand limb difference, and
Mm-hmm.
so our product pipeline includes new devices that that ultimately serve a greater portion of that patient population. So that's really what drives our innovation and our decision to create new products.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Point partial is actually the second device that, yeah. So the point partial serves people with partial finger amputation. So amputation distal to that MCP joint near the PIP joint. And from an incidence rate, there's actually a higher number of people with partial finger amputation than full finger amputation. So
interesting.
There's a little bit of there's a numbers game there. So that is kind of why we decided to develop that device next. Then came the thumb. Then came the point pivot, which is a modular component to the thumb. So really, it's in general, we're really focused on serving as much of that partial hand limb difference community as we can. And then, we're prioritizing the development of those different devices based on, what we think the kind of the market size is and how many people we can impact.
And I know that you have all this information on your website. What is the URL to the website?
It's www.pointdesigns with an S, LLC.com.
Got it. And I'll have that link in the description. The reason why I wanted to bring it up as if people are just listening to the podcast, they're not going to be able to see some of the imagery we're going to have on the YouTube channel. So I would certainly urge people to watch the video, because we're going to have pictures of all these things, all your devices, I should say, on the YouTube channel. And one of them that I thought was really neat, it's called the Point Endo, and that was designed for cosmetic cover integration. Can you explain that?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. And the motivation behind this actually came from when we started expanding. We started expanding into new markets outside the United States, and what we found is that in a lot of international markets, cosmetic appearance often is prioritized over function. Depends on the market, depends on the culture. And so we found that there was a little bit of it was a little challenging to enter some of these markets with our existing devices because they are very metallic and kind of robotic looking. So we were trying to develop a device that served two purposes. One, it was a lower cost device because there are other markets are a little bit more price sensitive to prosthetics as well. So we're trying to develop a device that was lower cost and could accommodate a cosmetic covering to fulfill that need to have it look more realistic, but also have some functionality. So that was the motivation behind that.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. As we were talking about before we pressed record, the mental part of all this is extremely important as well. I would imagine that I was a congenital, so I didn't have a hand on my other side. But people that go through the traumatic experience of losing something, I would imagine the cosmetic part is just another yet mental victory, or just something that they look at maybe with a little bit more positivity. Do you see that with what you do? Yeah.
So it's interesting. There are kind of two sides to that, and there's again a psychological component even to a prosthesis and how realistic it looks. So there's a what do you call it?
Like a report paper?
No, it's a theory, I guess.
Okay.
Or it's used a lot in sort of humanoid robotic applications, but it's called the uncanny valley. It's basically this. If you and I'll send you a link so you can actually display this graph on the YouTube channel. But basically, the uncanny valley it's a graph essentially. So on the x-axis is our comfort with human-like, is our comfort level, and then on the y-axis is how similar an object looks to be realistic or humanoid. And so there's what you'll see on the graph is that our comfort level goes up to a point, and then it dips way down, and then it kind of goes back up. So in that big dip is what we call the uncanny valley. And so as anything, prosthetics included, becomes more human-like, there's a point where our comfort level increases, but once it becomes too human-like, our comfort level severely decreases.
Wow.
Until it's equal to human, intact, anatomical human hand. So this uncanny valley is something that prosthetic device designers have to deal with and consider, and where we see ourselves entering that uncanny valley is with cosmetic restorations. A lot of time you're getting to that point where the prosthesis becomes it's uncanny. It's like it's almost real, but it's not quite. And so it's almost our comfort level with a cosmetic restoration can sometimes be less than our comfort level with a robotic looking hand. So back to your original question. That was a little bit of an aside.
No, thank you. It's great to learn that. Serious.
Yeah. So back to your original question, I think a lot of people do find having a prosthesis in general, whether it's a cosmetic restoration or a more robotic looking device, it definitely does impact their psychological wellness. And that's something that you and I were talking about earlier before the call started. I think a lot of, I think most people who have acquired limb difference, that there's a very big psychological component to that, injury, recovery, rehabilitation. And it's often, there's a misconception, even among the medical professionals, that finger loss is no big deal. People are sort of immune to the psychological component. I've heard surgeons say, "Oh, it's just a finger, get over it." And it's, couldn't be farther from the truth. People who have, partial hand limb difference are just as, if not more, affected psychologically than those with other levels of limb difference. In fact, there's a study that was performed, and they did survey a wide variety of people with upper limb difference, and what they found was that people with partial hand limb difference actually self-reported a higher level of disability than those with other levels, higher levels, so transradial or transhumeral limb difference. So very interesting. The psychological component is a very real thing, and a prosthesis, I think, can often help in someone's recovery.
When you were talking about the robotic part, I find that fascinating. I'm really glad you went to explain that, because when I was talking about the cosmetic part of it, I was more talking internal to the patient. But this is something also I would think that external to society must also go through when they're looking at a person that's wearing a prosthetic. Is that kind of the theme of that study?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Yep. Yeah. And it's interesting. I think, it's interesting to look at it from both sides. I think someone wearing the prosthesis, they can experience this discomfort with something that looks almost too real.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of stories. Again, this is anecdotal, so I don't have a study to back it up, but I've heard a lot of stories of, people lose part of their hand. They think they want the cosmetic restoration. All they can think about is, I want my hand back. I want it back. I want it to look like it did. And so they gravitate towards that cosmetic restoration. And then once they get it, they're a little off put by it, because it lands in that uncanny valley. It's like it's not quite real enough, but it's it's real enough that it's a little um, they experience some level of discomfort with it, and so then they sort of gravitate later towards a more robotic looking device.
I have a picture, and I'm gonna put it up during in the YouTube. It shows me. I'm probably 11 years old. I'm guessing, and my parents had gotten me an artificial hand at the time, and at that time maybe they were newer. I don't know enough about that myself, but I look ridiculous. I'm just going to say it that way because I have a smile on my face going, hey, look at me. But my right hand, which I'm missing, but with the artificial hand, is probably 4 inches longer than my real hand. And that's the thing. And when you talk about that valley, yeah, you would have just looked at me and knew that's not a real hand. It's a funny picture. I'm glad my parents took that picture though. One of the things though that I like about your product is they're durable, right? 150 pounds, your rate of return, or however you said it, less than 3%, but they look cool. Honestly, they are the coolest looking things that I've seen, because I've seen them in person and I've seen people use them in person. What is the inspiration for the design of what you do?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. The original designer who played probably the biggest role in how they look. He's one of the co-founders, Stephen Huddle. I got to give him a lot of credit because he has a very good eye for design, and I mean he's a mechanical engineer, and he laid the foundation for the aesthetics of that finger. And I'll tell you, it didn't always look like that, right? That took many iterations of prototyping and getting people's feedback. And so we did iterate it. But I think it took a while to land there, but between Steve's, eye for design and a lot of the feedback that we got from people we were going to be working with, and, future customers, we landed on something that I agree. I think it's
All of them.
really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, all of them were fantastic. Here's a question, and we didn't talk about this earlier, so I'm just kind of curious. If people want to get a device of yours, how do they go about it? Do they go through their prosthesis, or do they go directly to you?
Yeah. They would need to go through their prosthetist.
That's what I meant to say. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. So we only work with prosthetic facilities.
Okay.
That's we don't do any fittings ourselves. We do employ a prosthetist, but they are only there for clinical support. Essentially, they work with our other prosthetists. So we don't have the capability to do fittings directly. So there's that layer between us and the patient, and that's the prosthetist, the prosthetic facility. So that's one of the we do get a lot of inquiries from people who patients, potential end users, and that's totally fine. We welcome that. But the thing for anybody listening, one thing you should know is that the first thing we'll do is put you in touch with a prosthetist, basically. So we love to be a resource for end users, and we love to interact with them. And basically, what we do is we facilitate a relationship, if you don't already have one, between them and a prosthetic facility. And we'll look at where they live. We'll look at prosthetic facilities that we worked with in the past, and we trust and know will be a good provide a good service for that person.
Yeah. Are you constantly onboarding new facilities to do that?
Yeah. It seems like every day.
That's great.
It seems like every day we're working with a new clinic that we haven't worked with in the past. So it's with our device, we have a fairly well-defined kind of onboarding protocol. So being a relatively new device, and being as we discussed earlier, a patient population that's been relatively underserved, it's not uncommon for prosthetic facilities to have, obviously they've never worked with our device and they've never worked with a similar device. So we work very closely with new clinics to train them on our devices, and we support them and provide them with all of the information that they need to apply our device to a patient of theirs.
One of the things I thought was really neat on your website, though, if a person is going through that themselves and they want to do their own research, you have all of the documentation, all individually for every one of your devices. I mean, right down to the 150-pound load rating. Yep. I think that's fantastic. And not only that, something I really thought, you have an FAQ section on your website that explains, can I wash this device? Yeah. I would imagine that's probably a pretty popular area of your website.
I think it is. I don't have the stats off the top of my head, but I do think that's a pretty popular area. And of course, those FAQs are, it's funny. Sometimes you never know where the questions originate from when you look at an FAQ. Like, oh, are these made up? Those are frequently asked questions, and they got asked enough. We just created, we added to the FAQ list. So yeah, I think it's a good resource. And we're constantly adding to that resource as well.
Yeah, those are real questions. Because as I read them, I was like, yeah, I'd probably ask that question myself. And just full disclosure too, how I knew about your organization and love what you're doing. I've had 3 of your customers on it. Customers, or I don't know how to, maybe that's not the proper way to say it, but 3 people who have your device and just rave about it: Rachel Groh, Angie Coe, and Jeff Solberg. And they love your devices. So if anyone out there is listening to this and want to get the end user perspective, I would urge you to listen to those episodes, because that is real life right there. And that's what you continue to do, correct? You continue to speak to your, I think you call them ambassadors, if I'm not mistaken, and make sure that you're putting out the product that best serves the community.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm really glad you brought this up, Mike. I would also encourage everybody to go listen to those episodes and others. I think what Mike is doing is really unique and special. So, but yeah, so we do a few things to connect with end users. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's difficult because we're not dealing directly with the end user. We're dealing with the prosthetist and the prosthetic facility. It can be a little challenging to connect directly with an end user. So we do a few things to help to do that. And the reason for that is twofold. One is we really do want to provide a supportive environment for end users or potential end users or people who are going through this experience and rehabilitation and recovery. We want to be a resource. But the second reason is we take that opportunity to collect feedback from people who are actually using these devices. So how they're being used, what's working, what's not working, what could be better. And we take all of that information and we take it seriously, and we feed that back into our product development pipeline to either, sometimes we realize we could develop a different device. Sometimes it's an accessory. Sometimes then it's an improvement to an existing device. So all of that stuff we really do take seriously, because at the end of the day, I mean, our mission is really to serve those people that are using these devices. I mean, it's like that's ultimately our goal. Is we want these devices to be used every day by people who could use them. So we're in order to do that, you really have to listen to the end user and the customer, and you have to hear what they have to say, and you have to take it seriously. So we have developed one avenue that we do that through is a end user get together. We host it monthly. It's virtual. If anybody's interested in joining it, you can reach out to us via email or submit a contact us form on our website, and we'll get you added to the list.
Very nice.
It's a separate email list. It's kind of an ongoing community. the number of attendees varies, but sometimes we'll have 30 people on that call. And it's a combination of people who wear our device, don't yet wear our device, are thinking about a device, are, maybe new into this whole process, looking for information. And we definitely have some regular attendees, Angie, Jeff, Rachel being some of them. And then we have, some people who come and go. And it's just really what it is. It's just a space for people to talk with each other, be around people who are going through a similar experience, and we facilitate it, and then we just kind of observe and we take notes. It's like, oh, this is working. This is how people are using their device. This is like a tip or a trick that this person used, and we just listen, and we feed all that information back into our product development pipeline. And even, sometimes it might be improving our documentation or improving some resource, just to get more information out there. And then the other portion, or the other side of this, is our ambassador program. So Jeff and Angie are both national ambassadors, I think. So we have a 3-tiered ambassador program. Jeff and Angie are the top tier national ambassadors, and we have, I think, local ambassadors and community advocates, I think, are the 3 different levels. Nice. So it's a program that we're growing, and so again, it's through those ambassadors. Like Jeff, he is very active in the community. I think that's how you found out about us. You've met him in person several times, and as you know, I mean, he is constantly talking to all kinds of people, and so he's an avenue, and we lean on those ambassadors to, again, collect that feedback and feed it back to us. So we learn a lot from them, what's working not only for them but for the people that they're interacting with in the community.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting when you look at their social, both like Jeff and Angie, when you look at their social profiles and what they do on an everyday basis. It's a wide variety. They just like, we're all individuals, they're individuals, but they use your device for a wide variety, for their own life experiences, and it's so fun to watch them. They're amazing people, and I'm very honored to be able to get to know both of them as well as you. So as we move forward, and you move forward with Point Designs, what are you looking for in the future?
Oh, that is a great question. Personally, I'll speak to kind of what I'm looking for, and then I'll talk about the company, and then I'll talk about the field. I'll address this from several different perspectives. But personally, I think I've found one of the most rewarding and fantastic careers to be in. I mean, it's so fun to work with not only the people that we've hired and the team that we've built, but to work with the customers, the prosthetists, the orthotics and prosthetics field is just a wonderful, creative, loving, kind field full of amazing people. And then also the end users that we get to work with. So, I mean, for me, I'm looking forward to a lot more of that in the coming years. And I think, as we mentioned, the partial hand limb difference community is one of the most underserved, and still is, even after the years of effort that we've done and some other companies who have similar products have done. So I think there's a lot that we can do to serve more of that population. So as a company, some of the things that we're working on are kind of at the forefront, in the foreground, where we're doing a lot of education. So we attend a lot of conferences and events, not only within the orthotics and prosthetics field, but hand therapy, hand surgeon. So, we're really trying to educate all levels of the medical community to let people know that these devices exist. So hopefully we can minimize the number of times that a surgeon tells a patient, who has just lost a finger that, hey, it's no big deal. There's nothing out there for you from a prosthetic perspective. Get over it and move on. We hope to change that, by educating surgeons and hand therapists. Like we hope to arm them with information that they can then tell their patients who have, recently experienced an amputation, and provide them with some updated information that, hey, there are some devices out there for you. Another thing that we're working on kind of in the background, two things really. First thing is, there are a lot of barriers to getting these devices, as I'm sure you're aware, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have either experienced or heard. A lot of it revolving around insurance and approval and authorization. And without going into too many, nitty gritty details, I'll just say we've got a task force internally that's constantly working on breaking down those barriers. So making it easier to access devices like ours. And then the third thing that, kind of forward thinking, we're really trying to actively participate in and coordinate larger clinical studies to collect data to show that these devices are impactful and improving people's lives, because that actually feeds into the previous breaking down barriers topic that I just covered. So really, the name of our game right now is really trying to serve more people in this patient population.
Well, you do quite a bit already. And one of the things I want to say as we wrap this up is, if the listeners are out there and they feel like just because they're missing a finger, they don't know where they fit in the community, the amputee community, because I've had people come up to me like that. Oh, I'm just missing a finger. It's not easy, no matter what level of amputation you are. So I urge everyone to do a lot of research, and that research should include point designs, because that is one of the most amazing products I have ever seen in the prosthetic field. And I can't thank you enough, Levin, for being on the We're Not Stumped podcast. You're doing great things, and thank you so much for taking your time with me today.
You're welcome, Mike. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for doing this podcast. Like I said earlier, I think it's really unique, and I think you're helping a lot of people. You get a lot of you're collecting and sharing a lot of new information that will benefit a lot of people. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
Stumped podcast, hosted by Mike Boland. If you want to be a guest on the program, reach out to Mike at his email address, mike@mikeboland.com. This podcast is produced by One Hand Man Productions. If you are looking to start your podcast, go to onehandmanproductions.com.